Welcome to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And today's kitchen table topic is the clash of the billionaires. We're going to talk a little bit about Trump and what he's been up to and whether or not America agrees with what he's doing. We're also going to talk about Elon Musk and whether he should be the face of this current administration. And we're going to talk about George Soros. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction to some and a reintroduction to others and share why I don't support him, along with some others. So we have a packed show. It's going to be a great show. So let's start with some current events. Rudy Giuliani, I'm sure we all remember the crazy time that was 2020. Well, during that time, there was a lot of funny business going on, and very few could prove it. That being said, the emphasis on the video of the woman pulling the bucket that appeared to be ballots from underneath the table led to a lot of speculation around the election. It was more of supporting evidence, I should say, because we had already experienced the broken pipe debacle and several other things, but it went too far. This particular time, things went too far. And the way these women were harassed was just flat out wrong. And knowing you have been wronged and not fully being able to prove it can be extremely frustrating. And I get that because that's how a lot of people felt in 2020. But you can't take matters into your own hands. In doing so, it could cost you a lot of money. That was the case with Rudy Giuliani. It cost him $148 million, or at least that is what is being reported. The judgment against him related to defaming Fulton County election workers Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman following the 2020 election in January, after twice being found in contempt of court for continuing to defame the Fulton County election workers and for failing to provide financial details related to the judgment. The mother and daughter accused Rudy Giuliani in December of 2021 of falsely claiming repeatedly that they committed ballot fraud in the 2020 election.
Such actionable statements were false. In other words, Rudy lied when he made these statements about Fulton County, Georgia election officials Shay Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, when he described a now infamous surveillance tape in which they appeared.
Of Ruby Freeman and Shay Freeman Moss and one other gentleman, quite obviously, surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they're vials of heroin or cocaine. I mean, it's obvious to anyone who's a criminal investigator or prosecutor, they are engaged in surreptitious illegal activity again that day. And that's a week ago, and they're still walking around Georgia lying. They should have been questioned already. Their places of work, their homes should have been searched for evidence of ballots, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud.
According to Moss, that, quote, USB port that her mother handed her was a ginger mint.
A jury found Rudy liable for defamation, civil conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress caused to Freeman and Moss. And he later was embroiled in litigation with them over which of his properties and belongings to hand over to them as part of the case. Fast forward to today. The judge confirmed on February 1st that Giuliani had fulfilled his terms in the judgment. Those specific terms were not disclosed. Hopefully, all parties involved can move on and not look back. Moving on. The Trump administration is moving and shaking. But what does that mean for America? And what does Americans really think about it? Well, there was a recent poll that came out by Harvard Caps Harris, which reveals the majority of the country backs the Trump administration's actions. I'm going to run down a bunch of data points that have come out of this study that I find interesting. 81% support deporting illegal immigrants. 76% of Americans support a full-scale effort to find and eliminate fraud and waste in government. 76% of Americans support closing the border with additional securities and policies. 69% support keeping men out of women's sports. 68% of Americans support government declaring there are only 2 genders. Now, I thought that would be a lot higher, but okay. 65% support ending race-based hiring in government. 63% support freeing and reevaluating all foreign aid expenditures and the department that handles them. 61% supports reciprocal tariffs. 60% of Americans support direct U.S. negotiations with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. And these statistics are coming from the Harvard CAPS new poll that came out, and we're sharing data points on where Americans stand as it relates to the actions that President Trump is taking. Continuing, 59% support cutting government spending already approved by Congress. 57% support ending the ban on new offshore drilling. 77% of Americans support a full examination of all government expenditures. 72% agree that there should be there should be a government agency that focuses on efficiency. 70% say government is filled with waste, fraud, and inefficiency. 60% believe the Department of Government Efficiency, DOE, is helping make major cuts in government expenditures. 61% of Americans support reciprocal tariffs. 57% of Americans say tariffs are an effective foreign and economic policy tool, while 54% say tariffs will help get concessions from other countries. So, reading all that data, it appears that most Americans approve of the administration's job performance. Almost 6 in 10 say that he's doing a better job than President Biden. So, when speaking about polarizing issues, much of which have received a lot of backlash, particularly from the media, and many of these actions are quite controversial. But what about a universal issue, such as the economy? Because when I looked at these data points, I get it, and I understand why they polled them, because I believe these are the issues that we are really facing right now. However, as far as social issues, I feel like President Trump is trying to get us back at a starting point that we all can start from. However, we do need to talk about the economy, because the economy is a topic that I think is getting away from us. And while we're addressing it in so many other ways, according to this same poll, 38% of Americans say that the economy is on the right track, which is 10 points higher than last month's poll, but it's still very low. And personally, I believe that this is to be expected this early in the term, because many people are unaware of how we got to this point. And I believe that it can be turned around, but I think a lot of people believe it can be turned around quickly. And to add insult to injury, Kamala Harris touting the whole price controls policy, which should have never been mentioned, is a policy that could lead to immediate impact, not knowing the long-term effects of that and how it's just kicking the can down the road. So this needs to be a priority. It needs to be priority number one, which I believe it is. But I also believe the actions that are being taken, such as the tariffs, finding wasteful spending, et cetera, are all efforts to reduce pressure off of the economy. And that being said, I do believe that we have to message it appropriately, and we got to have a conversation about messaging it appropriately. I'm hoping we, as conservatives, will find a way to message, particularly on how these efforts, like the tariffs and all these other things, will reduce the cost of goods and services for all of us. But we got to do it in a way where the very basic voter, who's not an economist, can understand, articulate the message back to their friends, back to their families, back to their neighbors. So that is the goal. And what I'm seeing is the narrative around the economy is getting away from us a little bit. But at the same time, I believe that we're able to fix it. And I think the best way to maintain the public during this time is to not only be transparent with your actions, but we got to be transparent with what they are seeing that's coming ahead of us. So security checks are going to stop in 10 years if we don't figure out how to stop all this spending. We got to have these real authentic we've got to have these real authentic conversations. After the break, we will continue our table discussion as we bring George Soros to the table. And lastly, I share my thoughts on Elon Musk being the face of the current administration. All of this coming up after the break. I am Janelle King. This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship, and yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs31:8@att.net. This is the Church's Moment.
This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3, where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't worry. You can catch an encore episode tomorrow at 9 a.m. right here on Extra 106.3. And remember, our podcast drops every Tuesday wherever you get your podcast. And if you're feeling eager, you can watch the video podcast right now on YouTube. Just remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble pages, and your likes, comments, and shares are always welcomed. Now grab a seat and let's get back to the table. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And thank you to all of my new listeners, to all of my new subscribers, to all the people who are following. I am just so grateful. Thank you. I'm always trying to figure out what should I talk about. And I always end up landing on topics that I really care about, topics that I find myself going on rabbit trails. So thank you for going on those rabbit trails with me. Today's kitchen table topic, we're talking about the clash of billionaires. So we talked a lot about President Trump in the first segment and whether or not Americans are on board with his actions. Now we're going to talk a lot about George Soros, and I dedicated the longest segment to him because I don't know how many people really know him. So before the break, as I stated, we discussed the current events, and I gave you some results of a recent poll outlining what Americans are thinking about Trump's actions. I want to continue this discussion, the billionaires in politics, with this introduction to someone who I feel like it's possibly a reintroduction for so many, but for our younger generation, it's probably an actual introduction to Mr. George Soros. I'm sure you've heard his name. I'm sure you've heard a lot of things about him, but I don't know if a lot of people know who he is and why his name rings in infamy, particularly if you are conservative, and why he seems to be praised if you're a Democrat. It's literally like polar opposites. So I'm going to share today why I am not a fan of George Soros and how I've seen him in action personally. So I remember traveling to Israel, and during a Shabbat dinner, one of the people on the trip began to get a little emotional. And once he was able to collect himself, he shared with the table that his organization had just received a donation from the Soros Foundation. Having been in politics for several years, I've heard of George Soros and, of course, all of the diabolical decisions that he has made or endorsed. But this was the first time that I knew a person or organization on the receiving end personally. And unfortunately, I'm not supportive of all the initiatives from this particular organization. And I felt like donating to BLM causes in 2017 was not the best investment. Hindsight has confirmed that. But this was a BLM focused organization, a Black Lives Matter focused organization that received this money. Let's go back to the basics, okay? George Soros was born in August 12th of 1930 in Budapest, Hungary. Soros grew up during the dark days of World War II, experiencing the horrors of the Nazi occupation as a Jewish boy, horrors that will come into question when discussing his past. What are we talking about? Well, during the Nazi occupation of Hungary, Soros was a Jewish teenager. To survive, Soros' father obtained false identity papers that allowed Soros to pose as a Christian during his time under this fake identity. He found himself in a position where he was aiding Nazi soldiers by tracking the items that they were stealing from the Jews. And when Soros tells this story, even to this day, as he's older, he has no remorse. It's really hard for me to reconcile that. It leads to a lot of speculation. A lot of people have a lot of discussion around whether or not his actions or his behaviors were sinister or survival. And looking at what's happening in Israel right now, the fact that he has nothing to say about it on a positive note to stand up for Jewish people, it makes me think that his actions may have been survival then, but maybe he had Stockholm syndrome or some sort. And, anyway, and he found himself in the situation he's in. Personally, that's where I lean. Anyway, fast forwarding a bit, after the war, he relocated to England to study at the London School of Economics before moving to the United States. And in the 1970s, Soros founded Soros Fund Management, which quickly became one of the most successful hedge funds. His most infamous investment occurred in 1992 when he short sold the British pound during a period of economic turmoil, which means basically what he did was he bet that the British pound's value will go down. Then he borrowed pounds and sold them at a higher value, believing the currency would weaken. And then when the pound fell, he then brought it back at a lower price, returned the borrowed currency, and made a profit in the amount of $1 billion. While some hail this as a financial genius move and they praise it, there are others that view it as an example of the reckless actions aimed at destabilizing economies. And that leads me to the first reason why I'm not a fan of Soros. He makes a living off of collapsing economies. Think of the small businesses, the parents who couldn't feed their children, the bills that did not get paid because of the economic turmoil, not to mention the turmoil that he inflicted while he was playing his little game. So I get it. That was in the 90s. And you want to know, what has he done recently? Why are we talking about what he did in the 90s? Well, that sets the stage because that's who he is. And he hasn't changed from being that person. And that leads me to my second reason why I'm not a fan. He hates American values, but loves our policies. What am I saying? So Soros is known for establishing the Open Society Foundations, which promotes democracy, human rights, and liberal social policies worldwide, where most of his funding supports progressive agendas that undermine national sovereignty, traditional values, and border security. So the second reason why I'm not a fan is because Soros is a globalist, and I'm not a globalist, at least not today. I'm not a globalist. And he admitted in the 2004 LA Times article that was titled, I have to read this title because it was pretty crazy, but the title of this article is George Soros, the God who carries around some dangerous demons. That was the name of the article in 2004. And in this article, he described himself saying, I fancy myself as some kind of God. He said, if truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies within me from childhood, which I felt I had to control. Otherwise, they might get me in trouble. When asked about these comments later, he doubled down by saying, "It is sort of a disease when you consider yourself some kind of God, the creator of everything. But I feel comfortable about it now since I began to live it out." So I guess he's living out his God complex. Then he critiques America's political landscape, arguing that the country has become a supremacist nation due to an allegiance of market fundamentalists and religious fundamentalists. Soros has shared his internal struggles about his identity and ambition, stating, "Next to my fantasies about being God, I also have a very strong fantasies of being mad." He believes in his unique ability to determine when societal rules apply, claiming, "I do not accept the rules imposed on others." So he's above it. This is your top Democrat donor. We'll get to that. So that's Soros in his own words in 2004. If you want to read the full article, I'm placing the link in the episode description. So just go look at it. So while there are so many mainstream articles praising his philanthropic work, praising him as a savior to whomever, and as a beloved Democrat donor, he makes a living off of collapsing economies and coming in to save them for profit. In his own words, he has fantasies from childhood of being God. This is during a time when another man was having similar fantasies, and his name was Hitler. So self-proclaimed, self-centered, while carrying the banner of carrying out the human rights of others, he doesn't like that America is in a supreme position, attributing it to our free market principles and our religious values. Let that sink in. This is coming from somebody who considers himself to be an atheist Jew. But this is the guy Democrats place their faith in. This is the guy that they thank God for when he donates to their causes. Someone who doesn't even believe in God. This is the guy who hand selects causes that leads to chaos and eventually collapse. For those of you who are saying, "Yeah, okay, I get it," but again, what is he doing today? Because it feels like he's just the boogeyman who everyone blames whenever the Democrats do something that we don't like. But is he really involved? Is he really that bad? Well, matter of fact, in December of 2024, he said that he is committed to human rights causes. And imagine that. Someone self-proclaimed self-centered is now committed to helping others. Again, anyway, so much so that there are several organizations that are linked to Soros's network reportedly having received $260 million from the U.S. Agency of International Development, also known as USAID. So yes, my friends, this guy who fantasizes about being God, who hates America, and who hates America's standing globally, who owns the fact that he is self-centered and selfish, is potentially and is also potentially receiving millions of dollars from all of us. Yeah, that is why I'm not a fan of George Soros. And that's just my take. So let's hear from Italy Prime Minister Gloria Meloni. And if I'm not pronouncing that correctly, just blame it on my American accent. But during the recent press conference on January 9th, she was questioned about her relationship with President Trump and Elon Musk. Now, Meloni has had a cordial relationship with Musk, having met with him prior to his endorsement of Trump, and a public meeting between Meloni and Musk occurred in September of 2024 with former president of Hungary, Caitlin Novak. Now, that's interesting that we're talking about the former president of Hungary and Soros is from Hungary. But anyway, She stated that Musk is not dangerous to our democracy, contrasting him with George Soros regarding election interference. Soros, and this is how she feels about him. Soros is criticized for advocating for policies that are viewed as harmful. She mentioned that he has been the largest individual donor to the Democratic Party in the US, leading to scrutiny over his influence on politics. She mentioned that Soros' Open Society foundations provide international support for illegal migrants, working against legal systems in sovereign nations that attempt to deport them. She mentioned that his organization, Media Matters, keep that name in mind, aims to harass advertisers of media companies that host right-wing content and to manufacture negative press about conservative public figures. Soros has funded campaigns for attorney generals across the United States who are lenient on violent crimes and violent criminals, which Maloney argues has contributed to increased crime in major US cities. So she's looking at what he's done to us, and she's like, I don't want it to happen to me. So, if my take, and if Prime Minister Maloney's take isn't enough to cause a bit of concern surrounding Soros, maybe you should hear it directly from him. Take a listen.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes, yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was... well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. And it was whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Are you religious?
No.
Do you believe in God?
No. We may now think that everything is fine, but the fact is that the system is broke and it needs fixing.
What you're doing is asking some form of regulation to protect the world against you.
Well, I'm a player, and I think all players should be regulated. There have to be rules of the game. And
the Prime Minister of Malaysia said that the region spent 40 years trying to build up its economy, and along comes a moron like Soros with a lot of money, and it's all over. He called you a criminal.
It's easier for him to blame an outside force than to admit that they were mismanaging their economy and their currency. The French finance minister talked about hanging speculators from lampposts.
Soros says the Asian currencies would have collapsed even if he hadn't been in the market. They were overvalued. He says people tend to follow his lead because he's been so successful.
I think that I've been blamed for everything. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
Like risking $2 billion in Russia. When the Russian market began falling apart in August, Soros was the country's single largest investor. He called the U.S. Treasury and asked Uncle Sam for $7 billion to prop up the ruble. When U.S. officials failed to intervene, Soros wrote a letter to the Financial Times of London saying he thought the Russian currency should be devalued by as much as 25%. A few words from Soros were enough to cause panic selling that fueled the crash.
What's it like to have a statement that you make have such serious, grievous consequences? I mean, you can, it looks to me like in a number of situations, you can take a position against a currency or make a statement, and the whole country falls apart.
Well, it's a tremendous sense of responsibility, actually. And it's also a humbling experience because I am actually trying to do the right thing. And sometimes what I do has an unintended negative consequence, as it did in Russia.
Which George Soros am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral.
So I have the full video in the show description if you want to watch the entire video, because this was only a clip. Hopefully this gives you a better understanding as to why. For those of you who are watching this for the first time, hopefully this will give you a better understanding as to why so many people are anti anything George Soros supports, or why we should question all of his motives, his moves, and his influence. After the break, Elon Musk, you're up next. As our table discussion on the clash of the billionaires continues. Don't change that dial. You're listening to The Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Guy, and this is the Church's Moment. There is an incredible opportunity to start a distinct pro-life ministry at your church. We started one at our church about 5 years ago, and the fruit has been tangibly beautiful. We do monthly meetings that educate and equip the body of believers on sanctity of human life issues from womb to tomb by bringing in and featuring different pro-life leaders from all over Georgia, as well as featuring different ministries like post-abortion healing ministries or foster care ministries. There are so many great community partners out there. And then the second part of this pro-life ministry is having a care team. This is an opportunity to show moms in crisis, moms in unplanned, unwanted, or crisis pregnancies, that the church is the place to run to, that the church is a safe haven and a place to go for tangible help, real hope, true compassion, friendship, and discipleship. And yes, an opportunity to share the gospel in both word and deed. Brothers and sisters in Christ, will you consider starting a distinct pro-life ministry at your church? It's so easy. Please contact me today to find out how simple this is. You can contact me at my email, proverbs31:8@att.net. This is the Church's Moment.
This is the Janelle King Show right here on Extra 106.3, where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And if you're joining us for the first time, don't worry. You can catch an encore episode tomorrow at 9 a.m. right here on Extra 106.3. And remember, our podcast drops every Tuesday wherever you get your podcast. And if you're feeling eager, you can watch the video podcast right now on YouTube. Just remember to subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble pages, and your likes, comments, and shares are always welcomed. Now grab a seat and let's get back to the table. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. That's right. This is the Janelle King Show. And today's table topic is the clash of the billionaires. And we discuss current events. We discuss the man behind all the hate, George Soros. So now I want to close by giving you some of my personal thoughts regarding the current administration. First off, I'm a little concerned about making Elon Musk the face of the administration. Our party has been based on fundamental values and principles, and we need to ensure consistency in our platform, regardless of who represents it. When we elevate someone who has when we elevate someone as the face of the party, it's essentially communicating to the public that this person embodies our values, that this person exemplifies what we represent as a party. And this can be problematic because no one is perfect. And instead, I think we should focus on highlighting achievements and efforts rather than fixating on the individual. I want agency heads to be seen and not heard, prioritizing the substance of their work over personal narratives. Another concern is the current administration's push for artificial intelligence. And a lot of this is connected to Musk. President Trump signed an executive order to create a new AI action plan, effectively revoking the Biden administration's 2023 directive on the subject. The action plan aims to develop AI systems that are free from ideological biases or engineered social agendas to reinforce U.S. leadership in AI. This initiative raises alarms for me, because history shows us that we are good at identifying problems and errors. We're particularly good at the misuse of funds, and we're really good at executing all these ideas. But we often overcorrect when we realize that they're not good ideas. And then we become extremely cautious. So history has shown that we are really good as a country at identifying problems, identifying errors. We're really good at misusing funds, apparently. We're also really good at executing some of these ideas. But we tend to overcorrect when we find error, when we see things are wrong. And we must be cautious about using AI as a monitoring tool. Believing it's the best interest or believing it's in our best interest of the government to have believing it's in our best interest to have government oversight over all of our actions, or at least the major ones, this is not a direction that I think we should be heading in. And that leads me to crypto and digital currency, which is another issue or topic that Elon Musk is driving right now.
Reconciliation may take 1 to 5 business days, sometimes longer. And you have the ACH system, which is ancient and still in operation, which is allows transfers effectively like a check would be an ACH transfer, but it's not secure. And you've got the credit card systems, which are also not secure. It would be like handing your username and password to a stranger in a restaurant if you buy a meal. So there's definitely an opportunity for something that is better from an information theory standpoint. So and there you can think of it like data on a network, I think is the way to view it. What has the most throughput? What has the least error? What drops the fewest packets? Fraud, for example, being a source of error. And government interference in currencies being a source of error. But it's fundamentally an information system. So I think it makes sense to support something that improves the quality of information with which we conduct the economy. And Bitcoin is a candidate for that. It does, I think, some things well, and it's obviously it's evolving, and there are additional things like Lightning being done on top of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin per se is mostly solving for scarcity, or rather solving for essentially having no throat to choke, decentralized. So there's no one who can be coerced in any way to empty their Bitcoin account. Well, I guess they could technically, but on an individual basis, but the system as a whole cannot. And it has an open ledger, which is also quite good. But transaction volume is low, transaction cost is high, and usability for the average person is not yet very good, but it has a lot of potential. And I should say that, like, I'm not, and I apologize for taking a long time, but there certainly is a lot to say. In general, I'm a supporter of Bitcoin and the idea of cryptocurrency in general.
Digital and cryptocurrency poses similar concerns for me. So are we overcorrecting due to inflation and the looming threat of depression? I don't want to do that. Because while a global financial connection may seem beneficial, it may seem like a good idea right now, it could also place us entirely at the mercy of government control. Technology has its advantages, but we must remember that it's not tangible. For instance, I pay a monthly fee to Netflix every month to watch movies that I only have access to. I don't actually own these movies. And this trend of controlled access instead of outright ownership is a bit troubling. So while we are pushing for an expansion of AI, an expansion of cryptocurrency and things of that nature, I want us to pay attention to how much control we're handing over to AI. And it's funny we're talking about this because next week's show is going to be dedicated to AI and how I believe we've been conditioned to receive it, how we are automatically welcoming AI, and how did we get here? Like, how did we get here? So we're going to talk about a lot about that in the next show. But for right now, I want to finish by highlighting two issues that I think deserve our attention, as I believe the narrative may be slipping away under the left's influence. And the first issue is federal layoffs. I really hope that we can communicate this effectively. We must communicate the full truth, even if it's uncomfortable. If predictions indicate a depleting of Social Security funds within the next decade, we need to be honest about that. We cannot allow the narrative to paint these layoffs as purely results of DEI hires, that we just don't want any type of diversity in our government. No, the American people deserve straightforward information. Another harsh reality is that government workers have grown comfortable, leading to a decline in quality and customer service. So it is time to shake some things up. And it's essential to remember that many of the layoffs occurred because employees were given a choice. They didn't want to come back to work. They didn't want to come back to the office. Lastly, I really think we need to distance ourselves from this Trump is king narrative. It's really time to put this to rest, starting with President Trump. I think he can state clearly, I am not a king. I am a public servant representing the American people. This is a statement that could easily be communicated through a simple tweet or on Truth Social, whatever. But what do you think? Am I being too hard on the administration? Am I not giving enough time? Are you a Republican who's concerned, or are you just down for the ride? Are you a Democrat who agrees with what Trump is doing and you think your party's overreacting? Let me know in the comment section. And please remember to rate the show wherever you are listening. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, share, subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment and do all this because it's free to you. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It's free to you and quite valuable for me. Until next time, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth. Have a great week.